Hello there, GlenDronach of Whiskey Lore. Time for another whiskey tasting. Today, the third of a three-part series on tasting GlenDronach's longer-aged whiskeys. Already had a 28-year-old, a 29-year-old, and today is the youngest of the crowd at 27 years old. This is part of the cask bottling series. This is the 1994 cask. And so it comes in at 27 years old. Basically, it is a barrel strength, single barrel whiskey. And it comes out of a Oloroso puncheon cask, which is a different shape basically than a sherry cask, and maybe a bit smaller, just a little bit smaller, not much. And I've been talking in these episodes about some considerations of drinking older whiskey. And in this particular episode, I want to dive in before tasting this into the question of why do you want to drink an older whiskey? What is your motivation for drinking an older aged whiskey? For some people, it's about showing off. It's about saying, I have money, and, or, that I can show that I drink older whiskeys, that sort of thing. So it's kind of the vanity play of the whole thing. There are people who are trying to educate their palates. And so here's a great opportunity to see what happens to a whiskey the longer it sits in a particular type of barrel. So I like to say that on the young side of a whiskey, the barrel it gets put in is important, but it's not as important as it is once it starts getting to these longer ages, because the whiskey is becoming intimate with this barrel the more years that pass by. And when we're talking about, in this case, 27 years of this whiskey sitting in that barrel, all of a sudden you're going to really get a lot of that barrel influence. And so the barrel really does matter. And in the GlenDronach line, we start with the 12. Well, you get some barrel characteristics in there, and we're talking PX and Oloroso both being married together in that whiskey. 15, it's an interesting match to go with those two and taste them against each other because they go through similar processes, but the 15 pulls a little bit more of that character of the barrel in. And by the time you get to the 21-year-old, now all of a sudden we're doing marriage of PX and Oloroso, but the flavors are much more subtle. And in fact, when I do tastings, now I've learned you actually let them taste the 21-year-old maybe first or second, because it's going to be something that is subtle. And if you taste the 18 or the 15 before it, it actually makes the 21 kind of disappointing. And it's because you've gotten your palate ready for all this excitement, and now we're sliding into subtlety. So some people want to do this more to educate and kind of understand, and other people just really like either the mellowness or the subtlety of a longer aged whiskey. And I think that's what you have to do when you're trying to make a decision. Should I put $500, $600, $700, $800 into a bottle of whiskey? Is it worthwhile for me to do that? And what is my motivation? Now, in this particular case, I was lucky enough to be sent these 3 bottles of whiskey to do a tasting review on. So thank you to GlenDronach for doing that. And this has been a great education for me, because I will tell you that the things that I have learned are: make sure that you open the bottles and let them have a little time to oxidize. It's a small amount, but enough that the whiskey's had a chance to breathe. Because what I found was, I tasted these yesterday, and I couldn't really pull much of anything out of them. And today, it's a completely different experience. I mean, last night I really took some time and did the blind tasting and worked my way through them. but the flavors are much more sharp and interesting today, and it's actually making me enjoy these whiskeys, whereas if I had done my initial review on these, I would have told you that they're not offensive, but they really didn't have a lot going on for me. Now all of a sudden they have a lot going on for me, which I think is fantastic. And it gets me excited for this last one, because this is the one that when I was doing my tasting between the three last night, this was the one that was giving me a lot of different flavors and was really had a lot more of an exclamation mark in terms of flavor and character. So this is the Cask 5080. This is 54.3% alcohol by volume. Came from a single cask, 27-year-old, and they only made 667 bottles of this particular barrel. And if you look down in the notes, you will see what states this particular whiskey is available. Same with the other two. They're not available all in the same states. In other words, you're not going to see these three bottles lined up. They have been separated to different states across the country. And so I'm guessing Europe is the same. Europe probably has their own from different casks other than these three, because there were 12 casks that were picked by Dr. Rachel Barrie. Okay, so the oak comes through again on the nose on this one, but I get a little bit of a baking spice with this. And something that I've gotten out of at least two out of, well, actually I got it all out of all three, is kind of a cherry note. Not something I normally associate with GlenDronach. So part of me thinks that is likely coming from the cask. And actually, in the 29-year-old, it was actually coming through, I think, a little bit as well. It was coming through as cherry there. It was more berry that I was getting out of the one in the middle. It's amazing, actually, because it was a flavor I wasn't picking up yesterday, and today it was definitely present. Cheers. My God, this is a brownie. It's fudge and walnut. There's a little underlying note of cherry and orange in there. Oh, but that is big time brownie. I mean, amazing. And there's even a little hint of like a char kind of a flavor that I don't know how you are with brownies, but for me, I love the edges. I love the hard edges, and sometimes they may have a little burn to them. Doesn't bother me. I just love the edges of a nice piece of fudge brownie. I mean, and that I actually tasted that in that little bit of char. It brought that to mind, and that's why this whiskey was so fun for me last night, because it was the one that was really speaking to me, and it was bringing me full-on fudge brownie, and the little fruit notes that came along with it just kind of added a little extra character to it. But and there's actually even a little mint that I get on the finish on this. So definitely the winner for me. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I was so amazed at actually how much more I thought of the 28-year-old on today's tasting rather than what I had tasted when I initially opened that bottle and had it. So it's actually close, but I think this still wins out because it is so dramatic in terms of the flavor that this is pulling out. And you really, again, notes that I'm not really associating that much with GlenDronach, but holy cow, I mean, that's surprising. So I said it's a very good whiskey. $600 a bottle, because that's what it's going to cost you. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but I will say that it's a lot easier than 860, but still, that's an investment. And is it something that I'm going to go out and invest in? And again, that is up to you. Do you have the expendable income? Do you like the tasting notes that you're hearing? And is that really kind of your thing? So a lot of considerations in there. Hope you've enjoyed this 3-part series. If you got value out of it, please like the videos and then subscribe if you'd like to see more of these videos as I go along. And until next time, cheers and Slainte. Some sherry notes in there too, yes, definitely. Wow, that is a really interesting whiskey. So glad I waited